Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to round 2 of my Australian book recommendations. This is part of a series of recommendations that I have done over the last 12 months, recommending books by Australian authors for the Australian Readathon. So you will have seen, I'll pop a link on the screen, we have announced that the next round of the Australian Readathon is taking place throughout the month of July. There is a bunch of prompts, but at the core of it, the goal is to encourage everyone to pick up at least one book by an Australian author. Last year, I put out a video that had 100 plus recommendations by Australian authors across multiple genres for the readathon, so I will leave that linked on the screen as well. I could not find my original presentation. I'm hoping I didn't delete it, but I just can't find it anywhere. So I was going to go through and sort of reallocate all of the prompts for the books, but I figure you guys can probably do that. So if you haven't seen that video, go and check it out. But today I am going to go through some more Australian authors that I have read in that time in between and recommend their books to you. So in a moment, I'm going to flip to a StreamYard screen and talk you through some books and the prompts that they fulfill. So I hope that you enjoy it. All right, so here we go. This is the Australian Readathon bingo board for 2024. So if you haven't seen it, this is what it looks like. The prompts are animal on the cover, LGBTQIA+, your favourite genre, First Nations author, free space, a coastal setting, red on the cover, set in Australia, and host favourite. So I'm not going to go through all the host favourites unless they pop up in this particular group of books that I have read recently. If you want to find out more information about any of those things, definitely go check out the announcement video. So again, I have grouped things based on readership or genre. So I'm going to start off with middle fiction. So these are all books that I have read between the last readathon and now. So they weren't included on that list, I don't think. So first up, we have Uncle Xbox by Jared Thomas. This is a First Nations book. It does have a coastal setting. It involves surfing. There is red on the cover, and it is set in Australia. And obviously being a First Nations author, this is also a BIPOC book. Then you have Aaron Blaby, who could be used for any of the free spaces, but also Animal on the cover. You have the Bad Guys series. You have Cat on the Run. They're really fun and funny and really easy to get through. They're a serial series. There's a lot of them. They're very, very popular. Then there is Nira, the Broken Rainbow, Deep Time Traveller. This is a First Nations story. It is a time slip novel, and it's set in Australia, both in the present day and in the past, and obviously is a BIPOC book as well. Then there is Miss Mary Kate Martin's Guide to Monsters. This one is a whole series, and the most recent book that I've read in the series is The Bother with the Bon Killynock Beast. This is a middle fiction book that is part fantasy, part crime mystery, and it obviously is a very red cover, and it has an animal on the cover as well. Then you have It's the Sound of the Thing by Maxine Benber Clark. This is actually a poetry anthology. It has 100 poems for young people, and it is phenomenal. It is really, really excellent. It is reflective of Australian culture, so I would consider it set in Australia, and Maxine Benber Clark is a BIPOC author. Then you have the Wildlife series by Laura and Philip Bunting. This is set in Australia. They all have animals on the cover. A Very Long Walk is the first book in the series. There are currently 3 books out, I think. There might be a 4th. I have to go and double check, but I really enjoyed this one. It's a really fun, very lovely story about friendship. Then you have The Impossible Secret of Lillian Velvet by Jacqueline Moriarty. This is part of the Kingdoms and Empires series. This one does have quite a lot of red on the cover. It is also a fantasy middle grade story. It is quite long, but it is really enjoyable. There is The Goodbye Year by Emily Gale. This is a book that's set in Australia. The main character is in year 6 at school and is finishing up her final year at primary school, and this one has a historical element. It is also set during the pandemic, so just be aware of that, but it is absolutely gorgeous about finding your place in that last year of school and also learning a little bit about the past. And I've just realized there are animals on the cover, and I did not include those. Oops. Hold on. This is the benefit of having this open and not running it like an actual PowerPoint. There we go. It's fixed now. And then we have Scout and the Rescue Dogs by Diane Wolfer. I've read this fairly recently. It is one of the CBCA shortlisted books this year. It is set in Australia. It has animals on the cover and is an absolutely gorgeous book about a young girl and her dad traveling around in her dad's truck during the holiday season, trying to connect rescue dogs with truck drivers to be truck dogs. Then there is Being Jimmy Baxter by Fiona Lloyd. Again, this is another CBCA shortlisted book. This one is set in Australia. It has red on the cover and also has animals on the cover. Oh my gosh, I'm missing all of the animals, including for the next book. I'm a professional. Can you tell? Let's keep this thing moving. So then there is Wyler the Koori Warrior. This is a series, and it is great. The first book is Guardians. It is First Nations story set in Australia. It has animals on the cover, obviously BIPOC author, and does deal with themes of colonialism. Then there is Wurrundjeri, the Wombat Who Fell in Love with the Sky by Talissa Ilisara and illustrated by Dylan Finney. This is a First Nations story set in Australia with an animal on the cover. And this one is a really lovely story in the vein of Blinky Bill and classic Australian stories. Then there is Scartown by Tristan Banks. Again, this is shortlisted this year as well. This is a mystery thriller-ish type story set in Australia and is about three friends who find some money and a body in the wall of an abandoned sunken house. Then there is the Polly and Buster series by Sally Rippon, which you could use for a free space. It is a really lovely series about friendship. It also looks at living with ADHD and feeling big emotions and is just a really, really wonderful reading experience. I'd highly recommend people pick it up. Very easy read too. There's 3 books total. There is Duran, which is by Carl Merrison and Nakia Hustler. I have mentioned them many times before, and they also have another book on this slide. These are First Nations authors. The book is set in Australia. It has animal on the cover, and maybe if you squint, you could probably consider this red. It's more orange though in person. And then you also have Tracks of the Missing by Carl and Hakir as well. And this is, again, a First Nations book set in Australia. It has red on the cover. Is honestly a really intriguing read. So these books are more young adult on this slide. Then you have The Boy from the Mish, which was our group book pick last year. And this is by Gary Lonsborough, First Nation story set in Australia. There is some red on the cover. It is an LGBTQIA+ story as well, and is phenomenal. Gary Lonsborough's work is just amazing, and I highly recommend all of his books. Then there is Look Me in the Eye by Jane Godwin. This book is set in Australia. It is set in early high school, and it is about friendship and parental monitoring and how kids manage that. There is also The Quiet and the Loud by Helena Fox. This is set in Australia. It does have a coastal setting and red on the cover, and this is really a coming of age story and navigating first relationships. And then there is Deep is the Fen, which is one of my host favorite books for this readathon. This does have red on the cover. It does have an animal on the cover. Well, it's a skeleton of an animal. Oh no, there's a dragonfly as well. So there's a few animals here. It does feature LGBTQIA+ representation within the book and is just a delightful, magical mystery kind of story, and is definitely a fight the patriarchy kind of book. So I highly recommend this one if you've not read Lily Wilkinson. She's great. Then moving into some adult romance titles, we have Spirited Situation and the Ghostly Guardian series by Louisa Masters. These are LGBTQIA+ books. They are supernatural in tone in that they are all set at this bed and breakfast that is inhabited by ghosts. Then there is The Longing of Lone Wolves, which is part of the Fae Guardians series, which I have since read the entirety of to date. And this book does feature an animal on the cover. There is a wolf there. This is 9 books in total and are really enjoyable reads. They are sort of set in a post-apocalyptic future, our world, that has been reclaimed by the Fae. And so humans are considered the enemy. All of our heroines kind of wake up in this new time period and have to readjust to life in the future. Castles of Nevers and Nightmares is a spin-off of the Fae Guardians series and follows one of the children of the main characters from the Fae Guardians world. So I won't say too much because it would give away spoilers, but there are animals on the covers here. They do feature. Bees are quite a theme within this book. The Castles of Nevers and Nightmares is also a Why Choose fantasy story. Then we have my Edma Mugglestone page. So there is What'll It Be, The Reality of Us, and The Story of Us, which are all part of her Wattle Junction series. All of these are set in Australia, and What'll It Be also has an animal on the cover in the form of the tattoo, and The Reality of Us and The Story of Us also have dogs on the cover. The Story of Us is one of my host favorites. I read it recently, and there's also red on the cover. These are really great contemporary romance stories. I highly recommend them. They're so fun and so enjoyable and very Australian, which I appreciate. Then there is Mr. Right Next Door by Katie Montanaro. This is a contemporary romance set in Australia about next door neighbours falling in love. There is Love and Other Scores by Abra Pressler, which is set in Australia. It is an LGBTQIA+ story. It is an MM romance between a star tennis player playing at the Australian Open and a bartender. There is The Grumpy Store Summer by Ella Fields, which is a contemporary romance story. So could be a free space, could be your favourite genre if you are a romance reader. This is very much a grumpy sunshine story. I read this back at the start of the year for my summer reading vlog. Then there is Bad Vampire and the Kat Mackenzie series by Lauren Dawes. And this is a paranormal crime mystery series that's a lot of fun. It's very lighthearted and just enjoyable. There is The Bastard in the Air by Eden Finley and Saxon James, which admittedly was not my favorite of their books, but is still an interesting read. It is an LGBTQIA+ book. There is Prince of Ruin by Beck McMaster, which is a paranormal story. You have Kicking It with the Winger by T.L. Hamilton, which is a contemporary hockey romance. So you could either use it for romance or you could use it for a free space. Then there is Amy Andrews' series, the Sydney Smoke Rugby books. So I've read 2 of them recently, Playing by Her Rules, which is the first book in the series, which is set in Australia and has red on the cover. And then Playing It Safe is set in Australia, has red on the cover, and is also an romance, so it fits under the LGBTQIA+ title as well. These all follow players who play for a rugby team called the Sydney Smoke. All right, then there is The Revenge Agenda by Saxon James, which I read really recently, and this one is so fun. It is an LGBTQIA+ novel about a guy who accidentally finds out that the guy that he has been seeing for the last year is actually engaged and has been engaged for 5 years. And then once they split up, finds out that he's working for his ex-boyfriend's ex-fiance. And it is a messy, messy relationship, but it is really lovely. It has great ADHD rep as well. So this is LGBTQIA+, but it also has an animal on the cover in the tattoo. And then there is Luca by Nissa Catherine, which is book 1 in the Project Armour series. This is a romantic suspense series, so it could feature, if you like romance as your favorite genre. It could also just be a free space book. Then we come into some more contemporary books. So they might have a romance in it, but they are predominantly contemporary stories. So there is Rosie and the Dreamboat by Sally Thorne. This is a novella. It has red on the cover and is a really delightful short read about a woman who gets accidentally trapped inside one of those saltwater tank things that's supposed to be relaxing, but she gets trapped in there and she has to be rescued by a fireman. And the fireman that is waiting with her while they sort out how they're going to open the thing up is just talking to her and keeping her calm, and is just lovely. There is Peppercorn House by Nicole Hurley Moore, which is a contemporary story set in Australia and is about 2 people who meet by circumstances and fall for one another. And then also For Once in My Life by Carly Lane, which is set in Australia. Carly Lane writes rural romances and they're honestly just delightful afternoon reads. Then moving into some other genres, A Marvelous Light is a historical romance. So this one is a LGBTQIA+ book. First book is the second one is Sapphic, and then the third one is as well. There is This All Come Back Now, an anthology of First Nations speculative fiction. This one is edited by Michaela Saunders. It is a First Nations collection of speculative fiction set in Australia. There's red on the cover. It's awesome. I really enjoyed this one. There's some really interesting stories in there. There is The Year I Met My Brain by Matilda Bosley. This one is a nonfiction book, or it's written from the perspective of an adult who found out that she had ADHD during lockdown. And so this is what she has learned about having ADHD, what it is, and how, and the things that she has done to, live with her ADHD. And it is set in Australia. It also includes research from Australia as well. And then we have some poetry collections, because I've been on a poetry kick this year again. There is The Jaguar by Sarah Holland Batt. Part of this is set in Australia. There is Returning by Curly Saunders. This is a First Nations collection set in Australia. There's red on the cover, reddish on the cover, and it is an LGBTQIA+ book. There is Drop Bear by Evelyn Araluen. This is a First Nations collection set in Australia. Then there is How Decent Folk Behave by Maxine Beneba Clark. This one is set in Australia, and as I said earlier, Maxine Beneba Clark is a BIPOC author. This collection was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed reading it. There is The Body Country by Susie Anderson. This is a First Nations collection set in Australia. And She's the Earth by Ellie Cobby Eckerman. Again, First Nations, set in Australia with red on the cover. And then finally, the last book is More Than These Bones by B.B. Blackhouse. This is a First Nations poetry collection set in Australia, and it is also LGBTQIA+. All right, so those are some new Australian author and book recommendations that will now form part of a series for this readathon, and hopefully we get to continue it in the future. So in the comments, I would love to know if you're planning on picking any of these books up, or if you have other suggestions or things that are on your radar for the readathon, feel free to let us know down below. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave any kind of Australian emoji, either the flag or an Australian animal. Feel free to leave that down below. I hope that wherever you're on the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.